What's going on, it's JD here. Today we're talking about the Memphis Grizzlies because they are having a pretty underrated offseason and quite honestly the most underrated offseason right now. So what's up? My name is JDC. If you like the video, drop a like down below. We do NBA content here, but mostly Houston Rockets. Obviously, with the Rockets content being pretty slow in terms of news, we are doing a little bit of NBA content here and there. So if you like that type of content, drop a like down below, press the sub button. It'd be really appreciated. Let's get to the video. So the Celtics and the Memphis Grizzlies did a trade today that's surrounded around Hernan Gomez from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Celtics, and in exchange, the Celtics will trade Chris Dunn, Carson Edwards, and a 2026 pick swap, which I think is a second. So pretty great trade from Memphis because they do get some pretty great guards, and especially Carson Edwards, who is pretty great in the summer league. He's also someone that's very young too. So I'm really high on this trade. Hernan Gomez for Chris Dunn, Carson Edwards, and a pick. Pretty great deal right there. Now for the Celtics, I will say it's a little bit less favorable for the Celtics just because Hernan Gomez, I think he's a pretty solid role player, especially when he was on the Minnesota Timberwolves, obviously. But for the Celtics, it does make sense in terms of a fit-wise because they don't really have many big men on the team. Obviously, they do have Al Horford, who they did sign. They do have Enes Kanter, but he can't really play defense. And now they got Juancho Hernan Gomez, which is a pretty great addition, and then Robert Williams. So they do have some big men on the team. Obviously, Kanter, not really great defensive player. Al Horford is 35, but he is also making 27 mil. He is pretty underwhelming too, which is the thing. You know, he was playing for OKC last season, was pretty decent for them, but was injury prone for the most part. So they also had Robert Williams, who is very underrated on the Celtics. I think he's probably one of their most underrated players. Had a lot of really good defensive plays and quite honestly could become a very great player for them. So getting Juancho Hernan Gomez is a pretty great for them. So the Celtics, they're definitely less favorable in this trade because the Memphis Grizzlies do get Chris Dunn, they do get Carson Edwards, and they do get a pick swap. Now that adds on to the Memphis Grizzlies already young roster, who they already have people like John Morant. Obviously, they also have Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jarrett Culver, who was a pretty great trade right there. Tim Frazier, who's 30 years old, but doesn't really matter. A lot of really good young pieces on this roster. DeAnthony Melton, got a really good players on the bench too. Xavier Tillman, Zaire Williams. This Memphis Grizzlies team is definitely underrated. I definitely think they should have went for someone other than Zaire Williams because they did pick him at 10th overall in the 2021 NBA draft. He is a shooting guard, 19 years old, 6'8", which is pretty good. So could develop into a good bench player for them. They already do have an abundant amount of guards off the bench. They already got DeAnthony Melton off the bench. They also got Tyus Jones. They also got Jarrett Culver, who could be a guard slash a forward. Dylan Brooks is a guard slash a forward. Desmond Bane. So the rotation is going to be kind of weird. He might not even get any minutes depending on what they want to do with the roster. They could send him to the G League, which makes the most sense, but I'd want him to start on the Memphis Grizzlies, at least off the bench. But if he goes to the G League to develop, it's fine. So the Memphis Grizzlies, the way I see their starting lineup, probably going to be John Morant. I think John Morant's definitely a staple at their point guard. That's their franchise player right there. Now, shooting guard, you can go either way or here. So Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, those are the two names I could see starting. DeAnthony Melton's also a name, but I think he's better off the bench. In my personal opinion, I think Desmond Bane starts at the two. I think Desmond Bane had a really great season last year. I think, that was his rookie year, I want to say. So yeah, really great season for Desmond Bane. Really good rookie campaign. Was definitely underrated. Did average 9 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Pretty great stats. Did shoot 43% from the 3 too, which is something to look about. 47% from the field. So really great stats from Desmond Bane. Definitely an underrated pick. And honestly, I think he starts at the shooting guard. Really do, right beside John Morant. Now at the 3, you can debate about who can be the 3 because Brandon Clark can play the 3, but in my personal opinion, I think they do start Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks' defense is going to be very valuable for them, especially because this roster doesn't really have much defense. Like John Morant, he's a pretty decent on-ball defender. No, not too great, but also nothing too bad. Desmond Bane, I think he's a pretty decent defender too. I've seen only a little bit of Desmond Bane because I did see that Warriors and Grizzlies playing tournament game, but I also did see some other clips of obviously playing against the Rockets. So only a small sample size of what I've seen from Desmond Bane is what I can say on him. So from what I've seen, he was a pretty decent defender, nothing too great, but also nothing too bad. Dylan Brooks obviously was locking up Stephen Curry. in the play-in tournament, which is pretty great. So they need his defense right there. Obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr. the 4, and then Steven Adams up the 5. So this is definitely a pretty underrated roster right here. Steven Adams a little bit less because I think he's pretty overrated. He can grab boards, but his offensive ability isn't that much better than his defensive ability. So that starting 5 right there, definitely going to be very great. Off the bench, Brandon Clark, obviously a staple right there. Kyle Anderson, Jarrett Culver. I think he could break in some minutes. Depends on what the coach wants to do. I'm not really sure who the coach is, but I probably will figure that out later. So, and then obviously they got people like Zaire Williams who could come off the bench. Like I said at the beginning, depending on how they use him. De'Anthony Melton could come off the bench too. Tyus Jones. I think a pretty solid bench could be Tyus Jones, De'Anthony Melton, maybe Jarrett Culver. Xavier Tillman's going to be their backup big right there. Kyle Anderson, and it'd probably Brandon Clark. I don't think Jarrett Culver breaks in minutes, to be honest, because he is 22 years old. Depends if the coach really wants to play him, but I don't really see it happening too much because Kyle Anderson and Brandon Clark, I think they're obviously better than Jarrett Culver. So unless they do decide to trade Kyle Anderson, which I think he's one of their better trade pieces, one of their tradable assets right there. He is 27 years old, making only $9 million, so and had a pretty okay campaign last season. So I definitely think this Memphis Grizzlies roster could be very great in the future, especially with John Morant being how great he is already 22 years old, 6'3", pretty great right there. And then alongside Jaren Jackson Jr. is only 21 years old. So I think this Memphis Grizzlies roster, they're definitely making some really great moves right now. That Carson Edwards trade was pretty great, so you got to add on that. He's probably not going to break any minutes either because this team already has a bunch of guards and obviously Chris Dunn too. So depending on how the coach wants to play them, it's going to be very tough because they do have a lot of guards, but I think they're going to be running a pretty big lineup off the bench, Kyle Anderson and Brandon Clark and Xavier Tillman. So hopefully this team can at least make the play-in because I definitely want to see this team in the play-in again. That Warriors and Grizzlies play-in was pretty crazy. John Morant was absolutely going off. So if John Morant can have a better season than he did last season, I'm all for it. So hopefully the Grizzlies get into the play-in and hopefully they can sneak into the 8 seed playoffs. So that's my take. That's the video. My name is JDC and I'm out. Peace.